Ladies and gentlemen, H. Sheldon Wright, presenting the most powerful bridge building story I've ever heard. What do you think? I'm really looking forward to this, Sheldon. It's kind of a big deal.
Well, thank you. I'm not sure if I entirely agree, but it's very meaningful to me. And as far as the promotional stuff, there's not a lot. I can share it later, but primarily to the point you just made, at Woodenscooter is where you can find me on YouTube as well as SoundCloud.
Excellent, excellent. Well, we're here and ready whenever you are, sir.
Okay. Well, I guess I should say good afternoon or evening for some of you. And Mo, thank you so much for asking me to join all of you today. I'm going to start a little bit by giving you some background. And with that, let me say that what I'm going to share today, it's called bridge work. Okay, and it's connecting Woodson and James. And so the background is going to be on the two men who are the principals in this story, Woodson and James. So for me, I've always been into family history. It's part of a Cub Scout project in 1970. I made my first family tree. And in 1991, my sister, Sandra, gave me a Bible, which many of you know. They oftentimes have pages for a family tree in them, so I filled it out, which led me to finally creating a more formal family tree, which I had thought about doing off and on in my 20s. So throughout the 90s and 2000s, I made lots of progress on both sides of my family. My mother's side, mainly Halifax County, Virginia, and my father's side, mainly Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Now, there is one Halifax branch, the Hughes line. It's more like a twig. My maternal grandmother, Edmonia Hughes Bowman, she only shared limited information about her family. She did talk about her mother's side some, the Evans, but much less on her father's. So most of the Hughes information came when I read her personal papers after her passing. I did know that her father was John Thomas Hughes, and his father was George Hughes, who was reportedly born a slave in Virginia. So to learn more, I ended up hiring a professional genealogist, and her name is Bridget Burkett. And in January of '02, she confirmed George's August 6, 1853 birth record. Technically, it would be a birth certificate for today's purposes. His owner was attorney and slaveholder Woodson Hughes. Later in the summer of 2010, I Googled Woodson Hughes to learn more on my own. And I found out that his great-great-grandson, by the same name, still lived in Halifax County. He was on Facebook even. So with some anxiety, I messaged him and I asked if he was in fact the descendant of the 19th century Woodson. And he responded, yes, and he was working in the Halifax library and wondered if I needed some help doing some research that he could perhaps assist with. And I wrote back about our common Hughes history, and I also added that I had no axe to grind. He accepted my offer of friendship, and we became Facebook friends. And in the following summer of 2011, my daughter Allison and I flew to Virginia. We drove 3 hours to Halifax, and I met Woodson Hughes, face to face. We chatted and shared stories for what seemed like hours. And then I left Halifax with Allison, a much richer man than I had arrived. Sometimes when I share that story, it seems a little bit incredible that it did happen, but yeah. So he and I have kept contact, mostly email and occasionally voice to voice. And I consider him just like family. Now, I also consider myself a bridge, a middle ground that tries to connect people. I like to be in civil discourse that seeks as much compromise as possible. Not to compromise myself, rather to hear opposing points of view on issues of the day and learn stuff. And I also enjoy connecting folks just for the sake of it. The other man that I'm excited to talk about, also connected to Woodson, is actually a blood cousin to me through the Hughes line. His name is Dr. James J. Davis. I found him on Ancestry.com one night, Juneteenth, 2021, and we made our Hughes branch connection. Now, James is a great nephew of George Hughes, who I had referenced earlier as being my great grandfather. James and I have conversed several times on the phone, as recently as last night. He texted me today, and we also use email. James is also a nephew of another man by the name of George Ewell, whose nickname was Papa Skeet, who died this past January at the ripe old age of 100. Now, he was actually named after George Hughes, who was his uncle. I spoke with Skeet one time in a three-way call arranged by James. And in that call, I learned that Skeet remembered George Hughes. Skeet was a small boy in Halifax County in the 1920s and 30s, and he knew George after he had become a free man, a landowner, and a business owner. Later, in one of the last talks that James had with Skeet before he died, Skeet asked James about me by saying, "How's Uncle George's boy?" That always gets me. So, I'm very much looking forward to having a three-way conversation with both of them one day, James and Woodson. I actually hope they're on right now watching the presentation. I sent them both links. So guys, if you're out there, I love you both. And finally, I'm honored to have this platform, Mo. I appreciate you to share the story of the bridges that I've created and crossed to connect these two men. The Hughes branch isn't a twig anymore. It's now a thick and thriving branch on my family tree. And again, thank you.
Oh, Sheldon. Thank you. We love you so much. Thank you for sharing that. That's intense.
Thank you.
You handle it so gentlemanly and so gracefully, but it's such rich personal history, and it's so significant. And I'm just going to put the family tree up again for us to look at it, and just look at your family's faces and just how it all comes together, because it's really, really beautiful. And
Okay.
and you see how it's all very carefully laid out. Sheldon, his sister, his daughter, his parents, and then the original gentleman we're speaking about, George Hughes, and how he got his name from his owner. And this gentleman who recognizes, who is the link between George Hughes and Sheldon, and remembering that.
Yeah.
How's George's boy?
Yeah, that, I mean, I'm
That's
sorry.
you. That's a direct
that's me.
link.
Yeah, that's
It's
me.
heavy,
And,
Sheldon.
I'm
It's
sorry.
heavy.
I'm
Don't
sorry.
apologize.
Yeah,
Don't
okay.
apologize. Don't apologize. Feel it. We feel it. And we're grateful. I
Thank you.
didn't know that you would be willing to. We've talked about this story privately because it was one of your bridging stories.
Sure.
And I asked you if you wanted to share it in this way. I didn't know you'd be so brave to do it. So and you did. And we're honored. Wow. That, I understand it's a rather intense way to kind of wrap up, but that was by design. And maybe we can take this great, true blue fool's energy about being brave enough to sit still with the truth